What is going on, my fellow reef builders? I am Jake Adams. Welcome back to another video from the Reef Builder Studio. And I was quite impressed at the reception that we received on the video of the spinning macroalgae Chaetomorpha reactor. I realized in this video, as in many other videos, I kind of tend to just like breeze past a lot of certain details that I consider kind of elementary. So this is kind of revisiting the algae scrubber while answering some of your questions. So I think it was Mr. Shroomish who kind of commented that he'd love to see the harvest of this algae. And so this video, I'm gonna answer some of those questions about the Chaetomorpha reactor and just give you a nice long video time lapse about this spinning barrel of Chaetomorpha. I want you to appreciate, it's a little harder than it looks to get the barrel timed perfectly with our shooting schedule. But at this stage, you can see that the barrel of Chaetomorpha is pretty much kind of compacted right here, and it's just starting to touch this end of this particular chamber. And this is at the point where it can actually kind of stop up, and then you can just give it like a little flick and it'll start moving again. It'll get hung up on something. So we are going to harvest pretty much the whole thing. So this is how I harvest the Chaetomorpha without making too much of a mess. I actually take out the whole thing. I take out the entire freaking ball of algae. Take out the whole thing. And I'm gonna show you just kind of how it's growing before I put some back in. So I think we had one viewer who asked how I glued the PVC, the expanded PVC foam in here. And the easy answer is, I didn't. I just jammed it in. So there's a glued partition here. And then this is one piece of PVC foam to kind of elevate this section. It's all jammed in there. It's all jammed in there. And this is kind of a adjustable partition. I believe it's from a company called Reef Toys. They make a handful of just kind of weirdo aquarium accessories. Another question someone asked is, what model of Toonsy LEDs are these? I know this is gonna blow it out, so we'll put some B-roll with the right color. This is actually the Toonsy LED, maybe you can see that better on the reflection. This is the Toonsy LED 8850, but these are the old ones. The new ones, I'm sure, are a lot brighter, but with this style of reactor, it's less important to have like a really bright light because it doesn't have to throw very far than it is to have it really spread out. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the previous video, but this has an internal kind of like a temperature management. And so I think it runs 14 watts out of water, so it can passively cool up to 14 watts. And then what's interesting is once you have them out of water for a little while, they'll warm up. And once you put them in the water, they will, you'll just see the switch. It'll just flick on a little bit brighter and start running almost twice as bright. So you can see without the Chaetomorpha in there, there's like a really, really great rolling action. Another question was, does the Chaetomorpha turn into a detritus trap? And you know, in a lot of typical or stationary reactor styles, yeah, definitely. The reactor will definitely catch a bunch of funk for better or for worse. But in this setup, since the algae is spinning, it really, the centrifugal force actually ejects any kind of particles and detritus. And so when I pull this out, sometimes I will literally just kind of shake it in there to kind of feed the tank. Let's see, any other questions? If you can't get this kind of tumbling kind of passively, you know, using your setup, I don't see anything wrong at all with using a secondary pump to really get that motion going. I really like this setup because it's exposing all sides of the ball to really bright light, but then it gets a dark period. So this is a little bit different from like a diurnal cycle. So another question was, how long is a light on? That's one of the fundamental things that I kind of forget about. It's on 24/7, you know, over time. It's not even there is no philosophy behind it, just over time, just on previous versions of this that I have done, I didn't have a timer and I just let it run. But in this setup, since it's kind of getting flashed by the light, in some ways, the algae does have a period of rest on a 2-second cycle at the very most. So my harvesting style is basically I take out the entire thing, and this is the newer end because it tends to bunch up on the other side. So I just literally take a small handful like that, boop, boop, boop. It grows so fast, y'all, like it doesn't really matter how much I add. So, and get it a little small tie and drop it in there. And at first it's kind of amorphous, but in no time at all, definitely don't like that. In no time at all, it'll start to develop its own kind of shape. So it looks really silly right now. Yeah, it looks kind of peanut shaped. But the spinning action kind of helps to wrap any of the new strands of the Chaetomorpha around itself. Yeah, that's a little bit light. I think I'll just give it a little tiny bit more, just for funsies. And I kind of like to shake some of the detritus in there and just kind of wrap it around itself a little bit, get it up in there. Yeah, that's an appropriate size. Okay, so now I've got this big old bundle of Chaetomorpha. So I used to throw them out, but now I make a pretty good effort to get these to my local fish store. So one thing about having this much Chaetomorpha, you can't just throw it in a bucket and leave it alone because it will dry out. Or when you see how dense that is? This will choke. If you just put water in there with no aeration, it will choke and it will go anoxic overnight. So what I do is, this is a bumper crop of Chaetomorpha. So I put it all in a 5-gallon. Usually don't need more than that. But you see, like, look how clear this water is as I'm putting the Chaetomorpha. Do you see any detritus in there? Look how clear that water is. You know, there's little nutritious bits, and I'm sure plenty of copepods and stuff, but it's not by any means dirty. Like, all that water flowing through it and the spinning action of the Chaetomorpha is more than enough to keep it nice and clean. So I'm gonna spread this out, and I will keep the light on overnight. This is kind of important. I'll keep the light on, I have this light here, and give it an air stone just for a little bit more aeration. It's a tiny, tiny bit of aeration, and it's less to aerate the water directly than it is more about mixing the water and bringing the anoxic layers up to the surface where there is some photosynthesis going on. So a couple more questions that we had about the Chaetomorpha reactor is traces. This is a really good question because in some really aggressive algae scrubbing setups, iron and I believe manganese are two elements that can be rapidly depleted, and you might see your macroalgae or microalgae growth really decline. To be honest, man, I've given it zero attention. I don't ever see a decline. I don't add those kind of trace elements. So I haven't really analyzed it in depth with the ICP test. I think that would be more applicable if you had, like, you know, a really big algae scrubber on a tank that was only 100 gallons. This system is 600 gallons. I'm constantly adding food, you know, periodic water changes. So I think that's enough to keep up with the small trace element demands of the Chaetomorpha. And then another question someone asked is about pH drop. To be honest, like, I have not analyzed the pH before and after the harvest of a big chunk of Chaetomorpha. There's just so much other things to do, but I mean, it's a very worthwhile question. I just haven't dived into it really as much as, you know, the question deserves. So I think we're gonna take the next week or so to document a nice video montage of the new ball of Chaetomorpha growing out, so you can see in semi-real time kind of how quickly it grows and develops. Smells like very, very, very fresh Chaetomorpha. So after about a week's worth of growth, this is the tangled mass of nutrient export that I was able to get from the Chaetomorpha reactor. But keep in mind, there's like 2 dense, large handfuls I had to put back. So this is not even a full week's harvest. This is going to the fish store, and I believe I grow almost more than they can handle at this point. This is one of the most effective ways to grow Chaetomorpha in my opinion, and I feel like it's going to be super easy for manufacturers to incorporate this into sumps of the future. But I think it's really important to stress that your goal should not be to grow Chaetomorpha of a certain amount, over a certain density, over the needs of your aquarium. If you have nutrient issues, then go ahead and try to optimize how much you grow macroalgae or microalgae or whatever you use for nutrient export, but don't grow the Chaetomorpha at the expense of your reef tanks. Don't add phosphates and nitrates for your macroalgae. So if you have any questions on how to grow super lush salad style macroalgae like this, go ahead and put your questions down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see and never miss future videos like this, make sure to subscribe, and I will catch you guys on the next one.